You may know Vietnam for textile garments, but you've seen also in this video that Vietnam at the moment is not anymore only manufacturing what we can call low-cost items. Vietnam is becoming a magnet in the region, attracting more and more brands. I will survey a little bit the audience. Who is coming for the first time in Vietnam for manufacturing purpose? Please raise hand. Okay. Who have had already engaged with manufacturers and order, for instance, at least one container from Vietnam? Okay, and I guess the other part of the audience, please raise hand. You've been already exporting more than containers per year from Vietnam, right? So the introduction today, we're going to go through how to effectively engage with manufacturers in Vietnam and get your product right on, giving you a perspective, what is Vietnam manufacturing landscape at the moment that you may not know, comparison Vietnam versus China. And we're going to go through some of our projects, not only the beautiful picture, but also the challenges that we've been facing along the way and the solution that we implemented for our clients to make it effective and some case study. So, a few words about myself. I've been in Vietnam for about 10 years. I run an agency which is called MoveToAsia. I have a background in e-commerce. So for everyone here who also want to discuss e-commerce, I've been selling my websites 10 years ago. And websites selling to French, European market and US, dropshipping and Amazon. 10 years ago, I pivoted more to sourcing and manufacturing. And because I was here already in Asia, it made sense to also dig into what Vietnam were good at and try to highlight it to the world and assist SMEs into how they can actually find products here. So a few words about our company. We have been existing for about 7 years. We are here in Ho Chi Minh City. We have our office here. So if you guys wanna discuss about your products, we have a booth right here just after this room. So it's pretty easy if you want us to continue the discussion after, discuss more about your needs. And we have a team that is split between consultant type of people. For instance, let's say you are distributing to Walmart, to Costco, you have high standard, high expectation from your clients, the brands that you are working with, then we can really screen and then get an understanding about how to find factories here, how to vet them, do audits, etc. And we also have the technical people in-house who can also take care from the ramp-up of the project to all the quality control, basically an A to Z solution to take care of your needs here. So you don't have to fly here, basically, right? You have the team here. So what's the sourcing and the Vietnam landscape that you know? You have seen here companies doing textile, furniture, home decor. This is probably what you know about Vietnam, but it's not only that at the moment. Vietnam has been evolved a lot the last 10 years. We see here for 20 years difference. They used to be known to export commodities. So of course, cashew nuts, rice, still a main market, right? The agriculture in Vietnam is strong. Crude oil, and it used to be known for textile and garment 20 years ago. It's still the case here. You have seen manufacturers doing textile exporting to US, Europe, with strong capacity, strong technical processes in place, quality control. But Vietnam now is slightly different. And you may have seen in the news big titles such as Samsung invest in Vietnam, mostly in the north for electronics. But more and more, it also bring to the country the know-how, the expertise, the machinery, with trained people that are coming here to train Vietnamese people. We have here, for instance, mobile phones. We have here electronics. So basically, those companies, there will be more big groups that are having in Vietnam their own factory, okay? So they'll be only dealing for their brands. But it also brings along, if we want to discuss about the electronics companies that are able to do the entire value chain in Vietnam to make electronics fully OEM, source the components, taking care of the PCB, PCBA. I don't know if that resonates with some of you here, but there is a company here that can do that. We have all the machinery as well, equipments. We have had some project in some electrical cabinets, for instance, and you have seen on the video before some of the factories here that we work with, fully for exports, European market, US market mostly. And obviously, wood, you have seen on the video also before, from very small workshops to factories that can do a few hundred containers per month. Now we are in the difficult time, I would say. We may have the outcome soon with the tariff, Some factories that were only relying on US are a bit in a pause mode, but I've seen from the last 5, 7 years being here already diversification from brands that were only relying on China and are already implementing that diversification here. So we can talk more about that. So Vietnam versus China. Probably some of you were in Canton last week, or you're gonna fly tonight to the Canton Fair to attend to the phase 2. You may have seen differences just in terms of capacity, scale of factories here. We are in a country that there is a factor 10, China versus Vietnam, so obviously that factor 10 of the population, you can also consider it in terms of manufacturing capabilities. So in terms of the complexity, in China, obviously, with the huge investment that they've been doing over the last 20 years, so China is obviously ahead, right? In terms of know-how, expertise, machine, train, staff. But there is this growing, as we have seen, huge brands already here, bringing similar technology. I've been visiting personally some Chinese-owned factories in Vietnam. They have part of the core team that are Chinese, and it's going to also bring the machinery along. You visit factories here, they have machine from Germany, Switzerland, right? So they also bring in the technology and then the human resources. So in terms of complexity of products, you cannot expect the same here. Just with the history of Vietnam being able to do a lot of manual work, very good for handcrafting, sewing. This is sectors that Vietnam are good at, but are also engaged with some electronic factories for PCB, PCBA, and they told me that Vietnam is also a great place to do that because people are very delicate, very hardworking. Vietnamese people are resilient, right? They are willing to do the extra mile as soon as they see and they're working for a company that they see common benefits. In terms of MOQ, you may have seen factories here that will be asking at least one container, one SKU. Some factories may be saying mix SKU, one containers, so it's usually the norm. So that's why here, low to medium and medium to high, you have to take it into consideration. And sometimes factories here, they'll be open to start with a small MOQ, but most of the time it's going to be one queue, one container. And obviously in China, it's usually higher, even though they can be more flexible into letting clients doing test orders. Here, it may be sometimes more difficult. Lead time. So here also because in Vietnam, people after work, they like to go back to their family. After work, they like to spend time with their family, spending time with their kids, seeing their family growing. In China, the mindset is a bit different. They will have dormitories next door, 1 kilometer away from their factory. So the mindset is different. So as a foreigner, if you're new to Vietnam, you have to consider that. It's going to be less consistent. During Tet holidays, when factories are closing, people will go back to their hometown. So you have some time where you can have a bit some friction if you are having oncoming orders in factories. In terms of cost advantages, so here I write 20 to 25% under China. It's important to know that we talk about the labor cost. Okay. In Vietnam, if you are going to southern part of Vietnam, like the areas around here, we have Binh Duong, we have Long An, Dong Nai, etc. 1 hour and a half from here by car. Here you can have around difference in terms of the labor cost. If you are going to central Vietnam, the area, for instance, Hue, Da Nang, so Quang Nam region, over there it's even lower. So if you are, for instance, doing outdoor furniture, you don't mind having to fly to central Vietnam. This is a place where for sewing, textile, outdoor products, for instance, they are very strong. And then you benefit from also a lower cost. The difference is quite significant compared to China. In China, it's getting more and more expensive, but on the other side, they have machinery, they have very advanced processes. Everything is in place there. They already have the capacity, they already have the machine in place. Then, of course, you have this economy of scale, which means that the end price of the product will be lower. When I consult clients to know if it's feasible to do it in Vietnam, sometimes I have clients that tell me, they give me a target price. You usually start with the target price in Vietnam. It gives already a good indication about the mindset and also if the product is feasible in Vietnam. I think 2 days ago I have a call with someone from the US. The MOQ was 2,000 of containers per month, sorry. But the target price was very low for Vietnam. After checking a bit around with some factories, we were 30 to 40% higher than his target price. He's been there to some trade show last year. I think it's been 2 years he's been here, and he got saying the price was double, sometimes triple compared to his target price. So that's something you need to keep into consideration. If the product that you have been doing rely a lot on machinery, it's going to be hard to find in Vietnam. Then regarding to the compliance, again, the factor 10 that I said earlier is the same. Here, not all the factories will be equipped and will have all the certificates to meet with foreign standard. Of course, here today you are attending at a trade show. Most of the factories that are visiting here today, they are already having those export clients, so they are aware and they have the appropriate certificate, and they will be willing to take new certificates and to make new investments to match with the requirements of some of you here who may have specific needs. But you need to be more selective into the factories that you'll be engaging in Vietnam. Just because, again, the market is not the same. So usually when we have what we call China plus one projects, so we have clients that are already doing a few dozen of containers per month or per year in China, and we look to transition part of the production, we need to be more selective. So we'll be going through a process that I can detail after, that will be both through factory vetting, audits, etc. And then we make sure that they have the capacity to take on the similar capacity that clients already have in China. So that needs to be more filtering. If you have hundreds of factories in China, you may have just a few dozen here. You have that same factor there. They will be geographically spread across the entire country. So you will need to really get that hands dirty and then be on the ground to identify who are they, if you think they can match with your requirements. So Vietnam, opportunities versus challenges. It's not an easy way to transition the production here. Who have been going to factories already in Vietnam? Who have been going there? Just one? Okay. Only one person has factory tour in Vietnam. So if you go to most of the factories, like inside the factory, sometimes they may not have the language proficiency, meaning that even sales team, they are more used to domestic market. So if you are visiting factories, you may need help from someone who will speak the language, and we also have the knowledge about the product that you want to manufacture here, right? Similar in terms of misunderstanding, miscommunication, you may not always find the appropriate answer. We made a parenthesis here, and here in this trade show today, most of the factories, again, they are equipped and they work through global sources, okay? So obviously they are aware about how they can meet the standards of foreign buyers. So they are well equipped, they have most of the time English speaking staff, materials, some of them have QR codes, so it's easier for you to get the appropriate information, but it's not the case in the entire Vietnam. In terms of MOQ and quotation negotiation, this is the same. You need to go through a type of methodology to negotiate the pricing. In China, you often have the sales people on WeChat, and they will send you wishes on Sunday. Here is different. Sometimes you have to chase a bit the factory, and if you are into the price negotiation, it can be payment terms or negotiating on the first test order. It may require more time. And here, probably you have seen here, is very often the MOQ is one container. So mix 50 usually, and you start to get some idea of the price, and after this you get into a phases of negotiation where you can negotiate a few pallet or a few hundred of pieces per SKU. Then in terms of the professionalism and working culture, same, because of the language barrier we have at the beginning, it may be hard sometimes for foreigners to understand how to deal efficiently with factories here. Factory owners are very busy. When I go there, they very often don't have a lot of time. Often they wanna themselves meet the end buyer and then don't have the appropriate resources to take on and then to continue the conversations with buyers, with prospects. So sometimes it makes it more challenging than in China. That's just how it is here. It's just because the market is not mature yet. But with initiative like what global sourcing is doing today and other trade show, of course, more and more manufacturers are aware and are equipped to be able to match with the expectations of foreigners. And if you send cold email to a Vietnamese factory, you have probably 90% chance that they won't answer you. It doesn't mean that they're not open for collaboration. It's just that very often they don't have in-house the right processes, the right person to answer that. So very often here, it works differently. They will be more into a face-to-face way of approaching. You have been visiting factory here, that's actually the thing to do. You should find them, try to get them on Zalo, so that's the equivalent of WeChat, and then hire a third party, hire a sourcing agent, or just trying to do by yourself, but visit them in person. And very often, when you break that gap, then after things are way smoother. They can more easily communicate with you, but if you just send call emails, it doesn't work the same as in China. And there is also a lack of information. Again, Global Sources is doing a great job to pre-vet factories so for you to get an understanding of what's available here. But beside those platforms, there is not a lot of options here. Common mistakes. So again, inspecting and doing audits in factories for me is mandatory. In some factories, they just rely on company presentation, photos, videos, their previous experience, and from this you will know if they are able to do your products. But because here they will do mostly OEM, meaning that they will be expecting from the spec of the client, and they can do very good job. But they need the client to provide them the exact spec, so CAD files. They need to be working with an engineer first, designers, to prepare those documents before you send them to the factory. So obviously, you need to also go and visit the factory to make sure that they have had worked on similar product, or if no, that they are be able to fulfill with your requirements. I think so. Some of you probably you guys are new to Vietnam, so you will start with a small order. You want to test the market. You want to start to establish a new relationship, which is totally fair, right? You cannot put everything to Vietnam at once. Then you'll be expecting for a small batch. Make sure about the quantity that you'll be negotiating here, and make sure that you have the process in place to ensure that the product that you're ordering is the right one. So again, before you need to visit the factory, and then if you can hire a third party who can also help you ramp up the production. The ramp up phase for me is critical, and this is where you push all the know-how and all the experience that you've been building over the years in China, and you get them to Vietnam. I have sometimes some clients who think about taking a factory that is a little bit under the expectation, but they're gonna build up the factory. They're gonna put time, resources, sometimes investment, and I think it's also an interesting way to work with the factory, help them elevate and elevate themselves at the moment. And quality control. So obviously, when you ramp up a project, that's good. Initial work into finding a factory that is suitable. You ramp up the project, you have 10-20% of the production that is in Vietnam, then you need to make sure that that will stay consistent. I've been seeing sometimes projects where from the beginning, if you don't find the right factory, let's say you are too small for them, too small, okay? Because you just put 5-10% of your production here. After some months, they will take care less of the project. Just because they will be getting bigger orders, they will be also growing in size. It's good, right? But at the same time, you always need to diversify your supply chain within Vietnam. So I think now the China plus one should actually be China plus two, China plus three. So as soon as you find a good alternative country, you should have your local team to help you build it up. So I already touched some of the solutions to mitigate the risks, so I can go faster on that. So I emphasize again on the factory vetting and audits. Clients who reach out to us and who are selling to companies like Walmart, Costco, we have sometimes a month of work to find the appropriate factories. It's both through a desk study when we have 3,000 plus already pre-vetted factories. Some of them we've been visiting them, other we just know them from name, from experience, from network. You can use QC. QC have a very good pool of people here that will already know some of the factories you can be working with. So we'll be combining all those things to find what will be the best factory for our clients. Again, visiting the factories in person, I think is a must. You need to build up that relationship, even though you'll be working with a sourcing agent on the ground who can take care part of your production. For me, it's essential to have that relationship with the factory. Pricing is something that you can be negotiating along the way. It makes sense, but with all the inflation, Vietnam is still relying a lot of importing raw materials from overseas. So it's something that also you have to balance, not to pressure too much the factory, or it won't make sense anymore to do the extra mile. That relationship building, I touched earlier about the fact like you find a factory that is fitting with your size. If you are going to a too big factory, and I can highlight after an example that we had, then if that factory, Let's say you place three containers. The factory 1 or 2 weeks after got 100 containers placed from another client. You will be on the bottom of the list. You'll be the less important in their priority. That's the factor that you need to take into consideration, knowing at the exact day what are their production capacity, and make sure that you find the factories that fit with your size. And because you're gonna diversify to Vietnam, for instance, then hopefully you're gonna increase your orders here. So it makes also more sense to make that factory aware that they're gonna be a growing period over, for instance, 6 months. So the factory knows that, okay, even though you start with a small batch of products, then months after months you're gonna grow it. Quality control. Vietnamese like to work with Vietnamese. So after some time, I think you need to also consider having a local team here who are Vietnamese. It helps with the pricing negotiation. Each market, we like to speak with people that we consider peers. Same for me as a French person. Maybe more open to negotiate the price with someone who is French. That's just how it works. And then, yeah, that local company here can help you with the supply chain diversification. So step number 1 is to find the right factory. Step number 2 is to find another good factory. And then you keep that. And then you make the factory number 1 aware that you actually have another factory that you can also be working with. So your local team here, they have more pressure in case anything goes wrong. You can more immediately transition your production to another factory. I can highlight after one of the projects that we had. My background is e-commerce. So the first clients that I helped 10 years ago were actually e-commerce people. And so here, this is our warehouse. We have a small warehouse. So we do all the procurement work for our clients. So basically, we'll be ensuring the sourcing, etc., private labeling, and then we have the quality control team. We had a case where a client came to Vietnam, choose a factory. Okay, the factory was very good, audited, and accepted to negotiate the test order, which was small. Right after this, the factory got a very large order from the US, 100 containers to be doing in the next 2 months, and the factory was buying maybe three containers. What happened? From the beginning, the factory was too big compared to the order. That's not something you should be doing. And then that client is an e-commerce client, which means that in the factory, they will be preparing the packaging to be sent to the final client. Okay, so our client never touch the product. The person who will receive the product is the end client. So what we've been implementing is a different drop test, packaging guidance, to make sure that even though that client had a bit of experience in China, we implement new processes in the Vietnamese factory to also assist into finding new SOPs, implementing new drop tests and improving the packaging, because the requirement of this plan was, I think, a sustainable packaging, which were not fully able to be matching with this fact that there will be just shipping to a warehouse and then the client never see the product as the final client that is seeing the product. In this case, we have a French manufacturer, okay? So they are manufacturing themselves and they look to diversify part of their outsourcing to Asia. It makes sense for them to do it in Vietnam. And because they're a manufacturer themselves, they are very used to deal with subcontractors. We started with one factory. The factory was audited. The client came here, visited the factory, so we went through the normal process. One thing in this project was that main factory was using a subcontractor to make part of the product. Everything was agreed in advance that they will be having to do some QC, and then we'll be having to visit the factory and the subcontractor. But when the project started, we were not allowed to visit the subcontractor. So make sure when you start a project that everything is aligned, and if things change during the project, then how do you cope with that? Okay. What we did is that we find another more collaborative factory. That journey of engaging with factories, having a few factories in the pool to do different samplings, and then seeing how they cope with changing the planning. You ask them to change the product, you show them where they are wrong, etc. That's very good things to do at the beginning of the collaboration to see how supportive they are. And sometimes you can spot very early factories that are very open and very willing to do the extra mile, while others spec is spec. The product is not good. We need, like, as a buyer, you need to buy any product, right? So for this case, we have to find the more collaborative factories, and of course we transition all the know-how, all the product that has been done from the factory number one to the factory number two. So in that case, you need to be very agile. Most of you are sitting in Europe or in the US, so it makes sense at one point to work with the local team here to be able to do that transition. And of course, when you have those cases, there is a lot of friction, right? Each part of the puzzle will be defending their own interest, so we need to have someone in the middle that try to compromise solutions and come up with a compromising solution. Another challenge that you can find in Vietnam is if you are very used to manufacturing and sourcing in China, sometimes you send a picture to a sourcing agent in China or to a factory, you can easily identify through Google image. You can find yourself factories, they have website in English, they have the certificates online, etc. So after a quick check, after probably 5-10 minutes, you can already find factories. You have time to do samples, they ship samples to you, and then here is how you can develop your catalog, right? They have sometimes the ability to do private labeling, etc. So there is a lot of information out there for some mature markets like in China. In Vietnam is different. So if you are very used to this, you send TikTok videos, you send pictures to factories, and they are immediately able to understand what you want and to create a product for your needs. Again, in Vietnam, it's slightly different. So we have a client like this, and she's a lady of around 50, 55, 60 years old. So that's just the way she does. She has a few shops, she's a shop owner, she has a few locations. And that's just how she's doing sourcing. And that's just how she's checking new trends, checking new ideas from competitors. She's following on Instagram, some influencers. She's trying to get the latest trends and she's pushing that to her agent in China. So how do you do this in Vietnam? If you try to do it, it may be harder just because first, where do you get the information? Do you have any database that you can rely on in Vietnam? No. You can come to such a trade show. That's a very good way to already see the product, touch them. But if you are sitting overseas, how do you do? Then you can go and use the service of a sourcing agent that are able to do that. So for this case, from TikTok videos and pictures, the local person will be screening around, finding factories, everything in Vietnamese, and being able to consolidate many goods into one single container. If you ask in Vietnam 2 suppliers to consolidate into one container, you find a lot of friction. Here, it's usually one supplier, one container. And if you want to consolidate, then it adds up a lot of fees, you'll be losing. So what we did, because we are equipped with that, we just managed to cross 7, 8 different suppliers and put everything into one containers. And every month, because we know about the products that lady is looking for, we push them inputs. We also see the latest trends. We also in trade show like Global Sources again. They are showcasing very nice exhibitors, small artisans, and this is how you can get the latest trends. And we consolidate everything into one single containers on a monthly basis. I hope you get a different perspective about Vietnam, maybe some ideas. I don't know if some of you guys are into e-commerce, you are in outsourcing, manufacturing, or you purely do sourcing. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks for the session today. I think it was really informative. I wanted to get your opinion on what you feel like is the biggest target market now, especially within the United States. So it seems like you also have clients in the United States.
Yeah.
And right now, given the current situation with the tariffs, where do you see the most opportunity as far as production, and how are the tariffs currently affecting supply chain?
Okay. Thank you for your question. We have clients in the US. We do outdoor, we do indoor, so furniture mostly. We have some textile brands. Just to give you the wrap up about the situation, we have had 46% tariff on the top of the usual tariff. Then of course at this time it created a lot of friction here. If you visit factories now, these days, you see many factories, they are on hold, meaning that all of their production on the production line, everyone has been temporarily laid off, okay, which create a lot of uncertainty on the financial aspects. But it also creates opportunities because, of course, when you engage in such factories, if, again, there are some duties that will be aligned and still reasonable for Vietnam, it will make sense to keep that. From our clients, we had some clients on hold, so holding the situation for a couple of days. And as soon as we get the 90 days period, they started again the order, with of course a matter of it has to be shipped as soon as possible. Regarding the developments from our network, industry leaders, Chamber of Commerce, etc. We don't know yet what's going to be the tariff put on Vietnam, but over 15 to 20% on the top of the current one, it may affect the current economy because 30% of Vietnamese economy is relying on those exports in terms of the GDP. So yeah, we are still in the very pivotal time where the issues on the tariff will probably lead everything into that supply chain diversification. And obviously, for some product categories, Vietnam will still probably excel, right? On the buyer perspective, if you are new to Vietnam, you have to take it into your consideration when you vet factories, also that financial aspect. And there is not only just the ability to do the work, but how healthy are they at the current moment. And then you need to go to factories and really see that situation.
How do you see the maturity of the manufacturing industry here in Vietnam, especially considering like the full ecosystem, like the raw materials for retail items, all of that? So far, I have the feeling like still is very, very reliant on China. Is it moving forward to be more independent or not?
Very good questions. Thank you for this question. So it's true that for instance, let's take some textile garments. Many of the raw material will still be imported from overseas markets. We do have clients that are not importing from China. They are looking to diversify them to get a certificate of origin in Vietnam. So you can consider South Korea, you can consider Thailand, you can consider neighboring countries. For furniture, Vietnam is actually known to have their own local sources of wood. Obviously, most of the wood will be imported, but for some products, you can also see if you can source them locally and transform them locally. It can also make sense. So, probably depending on the price, your price, as well as the key targets, you can see how you can start to source the raw material here and sourcing within Vietnam. So it's growing. It's not yet at the level of China, obviously, but I think it's something also that the local authorities are aware, trying to get the knowledge, the resources, etc., to also get more and more ability to get those raw materials in Vietnam.
Thank you. My name is John from the U.S. How do you navigate in this arena where a new brand connect the buyer and connect with the manufacturer? Please help us because we've been trying to connect with buyers of athletic leisure wear while at the same time look for more suppliers, manufacturers to produce our good where it used to be produced in China, but now we're that person that needs to switch our supply chain to Vietnam. Please help us navigate that process.
Thank you for this question. So, are you an e-commerce brand?
U.S. brand. We're in e-commerce and also retail.
Okay. I guess you already find potential factories, right? Right. Yeah, you have. So, starting by your test order, do you know if the fabrics it's authentic fabrics? So I guess this is imported fabrics.
And that's one of the problems I think with the Vietnamese manufacturers. Of course, they want them in business, and they have not probably been as transparent.
You are new to Vietnam, so you need to get started at least one factory. Okay. Probably today you already find few potential suppliers. From this, you already discuss MOQ and probably pricing, so you know that you can have at least a start. After this show, I will invite you to place one order with one of those suppliers and keep the other ones just as alternative options, and then get started with first batch production, shipping there, seeing the logistics, seeing how the communication is, going through challenges as well to see if there is any issues that arise and if this how your factory is cooperating. And after this, just keep looking around, keep screening about the market and see how you can diversify your supply chain. She's in garment, so probably right after you can connect to make sure that you have had already exchanged business card, but that's just the way to go, right? You need to start with a few things, and then from the factory, of course, they will be looking for a model. So start small and then develop it, and then just not stay stick in one supplier, but keep looking around, keep looking to additional products, enrich your catalog, and then of course rely to the first one that you have been chosen to be your main one. But keep your eyes open and ears open.
As far as pricing and negotiating pricing, you reach out, you get a quoted price from factory. How much, in your experience, is there generally room for that to come down, or is that pretty much the price? And can you share any best practices for negotiating pricing in Vietnam?
The way you can approach that is first you've been discussing MOQ with the pricing. Okay, let's say 1,000 pieces for $10. You can start by asking them for 500. Okay, so that can be a first room of negotiation. You have the payment terms, that is also another factor. Usually it's 50-50, okay, 50 at the beginning of the production, 50% when the goods will be leaving the factory. It can also be another angle. But from any new collaboration, you can read the body language, you can see the attitude, you can see if there is any follow-up, and then you see if you are not too low in the negotiation. And keeping in mind that in Asia, people don't like to lose face in public. So you will identify when you feel that you are a bit too low. And usually the way we do with clients, when we bring them to factory, if even though they don't smoke, we ask them to go out for a smoke. Okay, let's go out for a smoke. We discuss, we get the insight from the factory, and we try to really read behind the discussions if they're really reaching a bottom or if there is a room to negotiation. And then it's just a matter of building that mutual trust at the beginning. But because in Vietnam, we are seeing a lot of projects that as soon as they start, after it's ready for the long term, we also try to balance and really tell our clients when we think we are not going on the right way by pushing the price too low at the start. I rather get a price that the factory is comfortable with. We get the first batch, we see if they are willing to do any extra mile, they have a strong commitment into delivering a product that meets with your standards, requirements, etc. Because if your price is too low and if there is anything happening during the production, that's where you can see friction, right? They will pressure too much that you will see a lot of friction. So you start with a price that you think is acceptable for both parties. And after that, when you put again the yearly plan, okay, we started with a batch of 1,000 pieces. Now I will have 1,000 pieces every month. What can you do? Or now I'm going to do 10,000 pieces. What can you do? And then that's where usually we come up with a new negotiation. So getting a first price that you think is reasonable, and after this, when you place an order, you build that first relationship, then you negotiate.
Do you see any kind of general patterns? Like, let's say they quote $10 initially when you first reach out, from $10 going from that then to the first order that you actually agree on an acceptable price, whatever that is, and then from that to the follow-up price. Are there any kind of general patterns that you might be able to say what's reasonable?
Yeah, a few percent low after the first negotiation, and then when they really see the long-term plan. And in Vietnam, we deal with those matters usually face to face. So it can be through a lunch or when you visit the factory, when you see the first batch. That's where we bring those sensitive topics, right? We don't do those things over email. We like to do it face to face. So when we leave the room, we feel that the atmosphere was not real, that you break something in the relationship. And then we try to go smoothly over time. And then that's why we encourage our clients to do that step of coming here to visit the factories, to meet with the key representative in person. Sometimes we can get the CEO into those discussions, and that's where obviously those people can be willing to pursue good pricing, and then after, it's all a matter of compromising.
You said a lot of things that go wrong a lot. What percent of orders, first time you're working with a factory, actually go right and just smoothly? I'm curious, from that perspective.
We have a lot of cases that for the first time it works well, okay? Just because of the experience and then best practices, and then you don't repeat the same mistakes two times, or you don't do your job well, right? So 80 to 90% of the time, everything will be going well. And then when there is challenges, it can be challenging into delays, it can be challenges into quality control, it can be challenging into sometimes the goods arrive broken when they are shipped to the final destination. Then of course, for those cases, we'll be looking for compromising solution. But again, if you are engaging with any of the factories here, probably they have been audited, they have certificates, etc. So I think 80 to 90% it should go well. And of course, it's all a matter of learning with each other, right? What are your exact standards and requirements, and make sure that you're on the same page with the factory. And as soon as you're on the same page, is 1 millimeter your tolerance? Is it acceptable or no? And it's all a matter of putting that right from the beginning. As soon as the factory know it, you make sure that you don't have wrong expectation from the beginning. Right?
Been down and I'ma get it right. Then I'll sight like